The gathering has begun. Alan, I assume you can hear me? You're on mute, but
I can hear you.
Great. We're going to wait, of course, but for those who are joining, welcome. And we're going to wait 60 seconds or so to let everybody actually into the room. There's something politically nice about the guy who worked for the Republican Commerce Department in a red tie and blue shirt, and the guy who works at the Democratic Commerce Department in a blue tie and a white shirt. It feels like we almost coordinated.
I thought this was sort of mandatory, Bruce.
Uniforms.
I received instructions.
Numbers climbing a little bit. We'll give it 20 seconds more.
Excellent.
All right. Well, we only have so much time, so I'm going to kick things off. Secretary Alan Davidson, head of the NTIA and longtime friend, welcome to the Internet Innovation Alliance conversation. You are one of, we're really lucky to have you, and you're one of many folks we've been lucky to have. We had FCC chairs, let's see, Kevin and Julius, Ajit, Jessica. We had Congresswoman Morris Rogers. We've really been lucky as a bipartisan organization to have some of the best and brightest. You've been a friend for 20 years with extraordinary background in industry, with nonprofits, an MIT and Yale Law graduate, the Obama-Biden administration, and now the Biden-Harris administration. Welcome and thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, and congratulations on the you've always managed to assemble terrific people on this series that you've created, and it's become sort of a must-watch kind of thing. So thank you for having me, and it's great to be here with a former Assistant Secretary of Commerce. You know a little bit of what you speak.
Although all the NTIA guys would rapidly point out I was not NTIA, nor do I pass myself off as that, although Larry Irving may tell you I do, but I don't. So let's just start. You're fresh from the wilds of Alaska. Had you been there before? Tell me about that trip, because the press sounds like it was pretty extraordinary.
It was a pretty unusual trip. It was a singular experience, I have to say, kind of really an amazing experience. And you know, we're on a mission here to start off with, right? Bring reliable, affordable, high-speed internet service to everyone in America, right? That is the simple, humble mission that we've been given by the president and by Congress. And we take it very seriously. Like, you know, we've been talking about the digital divide in this country for 20 years. This is really our chance, given the resources we have now, to really do something serious and substantial about it. And, you know, there's nothing like seeing firsthand where the real challenges and opportunities are going to be. And nowhere is that honestly more real than Alaska. I mean, it's breathtaking. Obviously, it's beautiful, but it becomes instantly clear what the challenges are going to be like. You know, unique, the topography, the scale of it, right? Just hundreds of miles flying over nothing to reach a village or a town where we're going to need to figure out how to get you know, high-speed internet installed. There's also just the massive opportunity to change people's lives, and we talk about that in this business all the time, like bringing the internet, it's going to change people's lives. But you really get a sense in talking to people there that this is going to make a huge difference for them. And we visited communities, a number of them, that you can really only get to by boat or by plane. And for them, this is about their access to being able to get healthcare online, to education, shopping. Lots of people using Amazon, even in the kind of interior of Alaska. YouTube videos to be able to figure out how to fix their boat, you know, or, you know, they really want this and they need this. I think one of the things that was really interesting to me also was they have it. You know, I think we have this idea that, oh, these are going to be communities that don't have the internet. They've got just really slow service. You know, a village of a couple hundred people. We were in this village of Tanana on the on the shores of the Yukon River. They're sharing 200 or 300 people sharing a 30 megabit per second connection, very slow. It goes down all the time in the wintertime. And they pay $700 or $800 a month routinely. People were showing us their bill. I talked to this 64-year-old grandmother there. She showed me her internet bill on her phone, $700 for a
Oh my
month.
God.
It's like half of their income. I guess if you said, like, what would you pay, Bruce? You know, if somebody said, this is it, what would you pay to get access to the internet today, right? Like, and people are paying it, and they're paying it for terrible service. So, you know, we have the opportunity to really change their lives by bringing them. We're going to be running, in this case, fiber down the middle of the Yukon River. We're going to be connecting these villages. This is through a tribal broadband connectivity grant that NTIA is administering. And these people feel like it's going to change their lives, and it brings them hope about the future for their communities. And that was, to see that so tangibly was pretty unusual.
That's very cool. And the fact that you have nearly $50 billion to accomplish this, it's a pretty fun role. So let's jump right in. And I would note, I was remiss at not at the start pointing out, especially to our friends in the media that you and I read all the time, there's a Q&A button. If you want to ask a question, my hope is I'm going to get through some that I have planned, and I'll keep going. But if folks have entered good questions, we want to reward people who attend by asking some of those too. But there's a lot of talk about mapping, broadband mapping, and we all know that historically, one in a zip code would count, and it shouldn't account. I'm interested in two things about mapping. First, why do you think it's so critical? How do you see it going? But then also, you recently said NTIA is going to wait for the maps to go through at least one round of the challenge process before you use them for your BEAD grants, which seems intelligent, but I'm interested in the rationale.
So first of all, you know, this is kind of a once in a generation opportunity, right? Like, it is not often that we get these kind of resources to do a big infrastructure project like this. This is our shot at bridging the digital divide. So we need to get this right. We can't be going back to Congress 5 or 10 years from now and saying, oh, you know, we didn't spend the money the right way. So we're really focused, and the maps are key, because we want to be both, we want to do this quickly, but we need to do it accurately. Every day that we, you know, don't deploy is another day that those folks in town and other places don't get the broadband that they need. But if we're not careful and accurate about where we spend our money, we're going to spend it in the wrong places. We're not going to go to the places where there's the greatest need. Congress recognized this, and in the bill, in the statute that we're implementing, the bipartisan infrastructure law, they told us the way you will know where to spend the money is to use the FCC's maps, and those maps are going to be absolutely critical. And the government has invested a lot of money in making sure that those maps are going to be better than they've ever been before. So we have to get the maps right, so we know that we're spending the money where the need is, where true unserved people are. It's been really hard in the past to get this done right. And as you said, like, the maps in the past honestly have been pretty bad. And there's a lot of different reasons, and people understand why. You know, a lot of it had to do with the fact that we had this system of getting data from the providers, and it was based on census blocks. So if you had one person served in a census block, the whole census block was viewed as served. So you might have thousands of people considered served, even though they weren't. This iteration of the maps is going to be a lot better, right? We're going to use a location-based fabric. The FCC has been putting this together. It's going to be going location by location. We're going to get much better granularity. We still have the same problem of, you know, the sources of the data. The maps are not going to be perfect. And what we realized pretty early on was the first draft of this new map, which is going to come out this fall, probably not going to be, it's not going to be as good as we'd like it to be. And we've heard from states and from communities, they want the chance to challenge the map. They want at least one shot at coming in and saying, you missed these locations in our community that aren't on your fabric, aren't shown as locations. Or, you know, a provider says they've got high-speed internet service on this street, but we can tell you they actually don't. And there are lots of stories like that. And so we feel that it's really important to have at least one shot at kicking the tires. And we're gonna work to make sure everybody's got that one shot before we allocate the money.
Makes sense. So let me ask on what you're going to fund.
Right.
You'd mentioned fiber down the Yukon, which is certainly exotic, but likely expensive. Not all that. You probably can't fiber up the whole country. And in fact, the infrastructure, the bipartisan infrastructure law suggests a technology agnosticism. If you can deliver the speeds, so for example, fixed wireless is pretty good, and in some places probably a lot more efficient. I'm interested in your take on eligible technologies for funding opportunities.
Well, I think the fact is that we want to give everybody the best internet service that we're able to with the funding that we have. In most cases, or not, I want to say in most cases, in many, many cases, we know that that's going to be fiber optic technology. That it is the most extensible technology. It is something that we know you can expand over time. It's got the greatest bandwidth and throughput. It's got the greatest resiliency in many cases. So we expect that a lot of states are going to do a lot of fiber. I will just say, though, we fully expect to fund a lot of non-fiber technology. It is just going to vary from state to state and location to location. And being in a place like Alaska, it's super clear there's going to be a lot of fixed wireless in the mix. There will almost certainly be low Earth orbit satellites in the mix. And so we expect all of that to be part of the different states' plans. And the states are going to all have, there's no one size fits all. Different states are going to approach it different ways. There'll be a different mix of technology. Fiber is definitely our priority, but we know there's going to be a healthy mix of technology in the end.
Good. And you're you're an MIT guy. You're a real tech guy. So I'm glad you're going to encourage from fiber to fixed wireless to others. Let me ask you this: you got 60 votes, by the way, for confirmation. You're a bipartisan guy. And I think that, hey, the Mother's Day resolution can barely get 60 votes. That's in the Senate. That's very cool.
I'm not sure, is this a compliment, Bruce, or is this
it's a windup? So the bipartisan infrastructure law was pretty clear. They don't want rate regulation, but there are some on the Republican side who are worried that the notice of funding opportunity might undermine that. And I'm just interested. I think you may have gotten a letter from that. You probably have responded to the senators and others, but what do you say to those who worry that the funding opportunity notice indeed may be setting up a rate regulation regime?
I don't think they shouldn't be worried about that. And we are not going to, we're going to be very faithful to the statute in terms of how it, and it does say that, the federal government isn't going to be engaged in rate regulation. The thing we should all be worried about, though, is affordability. And I think that is a key piece of it. The stories from Alaska are maybe the most egregious examples I've heard, but it's a real issue all around. Like, we can build a connection to somebody's home, but if they can't afford the bill to get online, it doesn't do them very much good. And so what we have seen is that ultimately the goal has to be affordable and reliable high-speed internet service. And if we ignore the affordability piece, we will leave a lot of people out. And the tool that we have, tools in the toolkit that aren't about rate regulation, but they are about making sure that if you're getting federal money, and Congress put this in the law, if you are receiving federal money, you must include a low-cost option. You must include an option that serves low-income Americans. Different states are going to define it in different ways. It's up to the states to define it in the ways that make sense to them. We will approve those plans, but it's going to be different in different states. Some states may really lean into that, what that means. Other states may have different approaches to it, but there's got to be a low-cost option at the very least, because we're giving federal money to folks to build these networks. We want to make sure that that Americans can actually afford to use them.
Okay, let's turn to 5G, and I'm interested how you think the BEAD funding will impact our efforts to succeed in 5G. Obviously, it's a global race. What do you see the biggest barriers, and how do you see the 5G race intersecting with the big broadband infrastructure funding?
Yeah, I think we'll be a piece of it. I'm not sure that the BEAD funding is going to be the thing that really moves us on 5G as much as other aspects of it. I think our infrastructure, our BEAD infrastructure fund, and for folks who aren't following the details, BEAD is our state grant program, the big multi-billion-dollar grant program that we're talking about for broadband deployment. And I think that we do, as I said, expect that wireless will be a piece of it. And so our hope is that BEAD is going to support not just 5G, but 6G and other future technologies that are part of that. But, I think the other big things there are other probably things that we're doing that we're hoping are going to make 5G, secure and reliable. And those include things like our investments in open radio technologies, Open RAN, for example. We're looking to create new kinds of protocols, new kinds of technologies that diversify the set of vendors who are going to be providing 5G technology and future wireless technologies. In the CHIPS Act, we just received a $1.5 billion innovation fund, the Public Wireless Supply Chain Innovation Fund that NTIA is going to be administering. And that's really to incentivize, new approaches to implementing 5G. I actually think like those Open RAN technologies, and I think that's going to give us a chance to solve some of these hard problems about the next generations of open radio networks. And we're pretty excited about that. I think that's going to be as important or more impactful even than some of the other funding tools we have.
I'd love to spend another minute on Open RAN because I'm very interested in it too. Although I would note, it just occurred to me, do you have more money than NOAA? Because NTIA, everybody was always like a second, third step behind NOAA, which has ships and satellites. Do you have the most money in the building this time?
The CHIPS Act just passed, so it's not a competition, Bruce. It's not a competition. But NTIA is a lot bigger than it used to be in terms of both the staff, but also the opportunity we have. So for sure, we're bigger.
Well, so let's dive back in on Open. What's the Open RAN deployment strategy? And there may be a few folks who don't appreciate the idea of how software can leapfrog. And maybe just you're the MIT guy. Spend a minute on why you're so bullish. I am too, and also what you think the strategy that allows NTIA to help advance Open RAN.
I think there's a lot of people who see the future of these telecommunications, radio systems looking very different than they look today, and adopting some of the modern technologies and modern software development that we've seen in other spaces. So today we have highly integrated systems. They're a pretty small number of providers. I think we've had a real concern, of course, about some of the Chinese providers and the security of the systems that they're offering, Huawei and others. And so part of it is, of course, a desire to try and make sure we're thinking about the future, and a future that doesn't just rely on the Huaweis of the world. But part of this is about really how technology is evolving. And so and what we've heard from a lot of industry is that those highly integrated solutions can be broken up, and where you have different parts of the stack, the radio itself, the software that sits on top of it, a lot of those being provided by different providers, different vendors, and all working together. And that allows you to have a high degree of innovation at each piece in that stack. And so we've talked to vendors who are building different pieces of those, who are excited to get into that. And we've talked to vendors out, particularly people who are building new networks, Dish here in the US, the Rakutens, and some of the vendors, some of the big providers in Europe are really excited about this. They think it's going to be more economical in the long run. They think there's going to be more innovation, and there'll be new tools that you can't provide in a highly integrated setup. So that's sort of a kind of high level version of it. But I think there's a high degree of confidence that 10 years from now, there's going to be a lot of open radio access networks. The question is, how can we speed up that timeline, help solve the hard problems in those opening up that stack, and that's a place where the federal government can help with funding, with research, and that's what we're going to be doing over the next couple of years. Okay,
great. Let me talk local coordination. And Diana from Fierce asked the question pretty consistent with something I've been wondering about, which is, you talked about the maps and the FCC maps and why they're so important, but some of the states are talking about doing their own maps. And it begs a question: is the state going to be required to use the FCC map? Is the state going to have flexibility? And how are you finding the local coordination? Is it net positive, or are you going to end up in disagreements?
I think local coordination is a pretty big piece of this. First of all, as a starting point, so much of the money that we're giving out is going to be administered by states, right? So not all of it, but a huge amount of it. And so making sure that states succeed is critical if we're going to succeed in this crazy, ambitious mission of connecting everyone, right? Local coordination is a key piece of that, because it's the local communities working with the states who often have the best sense of, where are people unserved? What's the best way to serve them? So we are actually leaning into that idea of requiring that the states look to local communities and get their input as they develop their plans. So we'll be pushing that. I also think, in terms of the mapping, it's very clear what we'll be doing with our maps, which is we have to use the FCC maps for allocations. But the states themselves, I think different states are going to adopt different approaches. We're going to look to the FCC maps as the ultimate source of truth about where deployment can and can't happen. But I think states will be guided by their own information and by that local coordination in figuring out actually how to build this.
Okay. Here's one. When I think of you, and part of it is we were on the board of CDT together, but you're an expert in privacy policy, and you've been thinking about and focused on that for as long as I've known you, for 2 decades.
Yeah.
And NTIA has regularly been the lead within previous administrations. We've got a 3 corners bill up there. Then the Senate Commerce has their own thoughts about what a bill might include. You got California, which seems to influence the speaker. You were recently quoted suggesting that there may be something coming out from NTIA and or the administration on privacy. I'm interested in what you're thinking. Whether is it if it's not too crowded, what's the contribution you're going to make, or do you feel like the things that have been proposed are incomplete?
I think the biggest thing is that we need to do more to protect people's privacy online. And that's the starting point. This is something the administration cares about, the president has spoken about. And Bruce, we've been in this space for a while. If we'd been sitting here 20 years ago and having a conversation, we said, 20 years from now, do you think there'll be, let's take bets on whether there would be some kind of baseline privacy law in this country. Yeah, of course you would have assumed there would be. I mean, it's it's sort of shocking to imagine that we've gone all this time without some kind of baseline privacy protection for consumer privacy. And, the rest of the world is moving in that direction. Many, many countries are adopting rules like that. Europe has done it. Now the states are doing it. And, we're actually hurting ourselves by not having some kind of baseline federal rule. Innovation actually thrives when we've got those guardrails in place. There are so many powerful uses of data. We hear about them all the time, to innovate in healthcare, to use for AI. Companies want to unlock the power of that data, but unless we've got good guardrails in place, we're going to have this tension about how to use that data. And so I think it's a failure of leadership that we don't have a federal privacy law. There are a lot of different ways to do it. There's some good initiatives up on the Hill. I mean, the administration has not taken a particular position on any of those bills, but I think, there's a lot of people who feel really strongly that we would be well served as a country if we had some kind of comprehensive federal standard in place.
So I'm going to agree with you on that, and I'm encouraged that that CMR and Pallone and Wicker have at least 3 of the 4 big poll tents. But how is what you hope to do at NTIA different, say, than the FTC or than the Hill? Where's the contribution?
Well, I think you're going to see this administration using all the tools in the toolkit. The FTC's got a real role to play, and we've seen now they've done this advance notice of proposed rulemaking. They're a regulator, and I think one thing that's different about the role that I hope NTIA will play is we're not the regulator in the space. We're here. Our statutory role is to be the president's principal advisor on telecommunications and information policy. So we're policy advisors, and our role is to help this administration think about what policy ought to look like. And so whether it's providing technical assistance to the Hill on the various bills that are out there, providing advice to the White House and the administration, doing the kinds of requests for comment and the papers that we've done in the past, that's the role I'm hoping NTIA will play here. We've just done a big listening session around privacy and civil rights, and that's an area we want to explore more. So I think stay tuned for more from us on that. And you know, we're here to help as all these conversations happen on the Hill and in the administration.
I'm going to, it's not a curveball here, but I'm going to throw you I know you're not in the labor department, but you're kind of in the labor department right now. Two really interesting questions. Erica from Equipment Today is interested in how there are 2 job openings for every person looking for work right now. Yeah. A lot of this broadband, even with the funding, is going to require people working construction who may or may not be working construction. And there's a demand for them in lots of construction. And then Nicole asks about NTIA and your own hiring. You've got the money. Are you finding the people, one per state, and interested in both the private sector hiring, which needs to be there, and your own?
So both giant challenges. The private sector hiring, it's a huge opportunity. And the President said this isn't just this isn't just an infrastructure bill, it's a jobs bill, right? And so part of what we're doing, it's not just about connecting every people, it's also about providing jobs to do that. And so, yeah, we're expecting just the broadband piece of this to create tens of thousands, over 100,000 new jobs as we go out and spend these billions of dollars to connect everyone. We have heard from industry this is going to be a huge challenge. And part of what we're doing is encouraging states to think about spending part of their money on workforce development. And we've been out there speaking to, and want to do this more, talking to community colleges, talking to people who are thinking about skills development. How can we be, taking this moment while we're getting those maps, figuring out how to deploy the money, to be training up a workforce that's ready when the money comes to be part of building these networks. And that's an exciting opportunity. And I think we feel very strongly, I know Secretary Raimondo feels very strongly, that we want a diverse workforce, and we want these networks to be built by the communities that are being served by them. So you'll see more on that. That's a big push here.
Great.
But it's also a big challenge.
You mentioned your boss, by the way. She's pretty impressive. I've been able to hear her a couple of times present and be in a couple of meetings sort of on the back bench. She's the real deal, but we're not going to go there now because there's all kind of cross political winds for all of us there. Let me ask you, Marie.
She is, yeah.
Marie Curry's question at Bloomberg Government. She was taking a look both at your thoughts you mentioned Alaska, but they're also tribal. There's some really remote, really expensive areas to wire up. And there are both questions, or to connect, I should say, because fixed wireless may often be a better solution, or other wireless. First, what are your thoughts on the areas that are really expensive, as opposed to using those dollars? The same amount of dollars can connect potentially more. But then secondarily, what she asks, I often think about is, it's a mistake if we think you're going to invest once and then they have broadband and there will not be further investments needed. And, and even this giant pot of money, this will run out. So what's the theory on the areas that are remote and high cost, not just to hook up once, but to continually serve?
Well, this is an infrastructure bill, right? And so the bill is about, or not bill, it's a law. It's an infrastructure law and an infrastructure program. So we are here to build out that infrastructure and to try and create the economic incentives that make it possible to build sustainable networks over time. And it's right to say and ask that question about there will be a need to make sure these networks are sustainable. But that's part of what we're asking states to do as they decide how to spend the money, is make sure they're doing it in a way and with providers who've got an economic, sustainable economic model moving forward. The hope is that, and the theory is that, federal funding on the capital expenditures, you've got these places that are very hard to build to, that will tip the scale to allowing people to bid on these projects who wouldn't be able to otherwise service these areas. I do think, again, it's not one size fits all. Every state is going to look a little bit different. And to this really high, this cost point is a really important one. Some places, we expect that some states are going to be able to, for example, make sure that everybody in their state has, a fiber connection with the money that they're going to be given. There are going to be other states that we know are going to be really challenged just to be able to serve people in any way at the levels that we've been required to do. So different states, we've got tools for the different states. There's a high cost threshold, there's priority projects and other projects that are going to get funded. And that's where that technology mix comes in. It's going to be fiber, but then in a lot of places where it's just too expensive, we do think there'll be other technologies that are less expensive per location passed, and states will do that.
So it's 331. If with your indulgence, let's go to 335 if that's okay. And then
sounds good.
Apologies to Charlie and the rest of the team if we make you late to things. So I can't talk to an NTIA lead without going into spectrum coordination. And to be fair, before you got there was quite a dust up between the FAA and the FCC over what seemed to be spectrum lack of coordination. In theory, you're the guy who brings everybody in the same room and agrees on what's going to get done. How's that going? And because the finite spectrum, lots of competing desired uses of it. And how can people help you?
That's nice of you to ask. Right now, the starting point, of course, like spectrum is just too important for us not to get this right. We're relying on it. The future of our competitiveness in the wireless space is essential. All these uses that people know and love, our phones, our mobile data. The other side of it, of course, is that there's a huge amount of federal need as well. Aviation safety, military uses, radars, weather satellites, climate research. And so we've got to get both of those right, and we have to find ways to meet both of those sets of needs. When it doesn't work, it's a problem. The good news, I think, right now is we've had a couple of places where it hasn't worked recently, and I think that's been a little bit of a wake-up call for the federal community that we're not well served when spectrum fights are on the front pages of the paper and people are feeling like they have to choose between their mobile phones and the safety of airlines, right? For example, we have to be able to get that right. And so I think there is a newfound I don't want to say newfound, but there's a stronger opportunity right now for a couple of things: better coordination, which Chairwoman Rosenworcel at the FCC has been a great partner, been really great to work with her. We're really investing in more evidence-based processes, like really clearly understanding, like when you see interference, what does that really mean? How do we measure that? And also thinking about how you lean into new technologies, because we want to think about how we can use spectrum sharing, new bands, other kinds of innovative approaches to making sure that we're getting the most out of the spectrum that we've got. All of that's going to lead to a national spectrum strategy, which is going to be a real project. It's not going to be a surprise. We're going to really be looking for everybody's input, and it's our biggest to-do list item in the coming months in this space. And I'll just say, in terms of help, we're going to need all the input we can get, because the truth is the low-hanging fruit is gone, right? Like the easy answers in spectrum, just repurpose this band, nobody's using it, or it's not too expensive to get somebody to change what they're doing. That's kind of over. And it's going to be all about innovative uses, new pieces of spectrum that we never thought we could make use of, how to be smart about sharing. And that's where we're going to need the best and brightest to help us. So
final question, just to follow on that. Plenty of folks across industry, from satellite to telecom to tech, hopefully are watching or will watch this. What would be most helpful to you? What do you want people to start coming in and talking to you about? And what do you want to hear from the private sector as somebody who's worn all the hats?
Well, there's so many things. I mean, I think on the spectrum side, we're looking for the best. We're looking for the best ideas. We're looking for innovation. We've got to make sharing work. In the internet space, we need more U.S. leadership to promote, to both protect consumers. We need to figure out, we're not in a sustainable place on privacy. I'd say we're not in a sustainable place on competition. We could probably spend an hour talking about that. We need better rules of the road, but part of that is also about helping us exert US leadership and promote this vision of the internet that we've all been pushing for years, which is really that open vision of a free and open network where people can get access to information, versus the fight we're having with the authoritarian regimes of the world who are pushing for closed networks, more government control. That is a huge fight we need everybody to be part of. And then the last thing on my wish list is where we started, which is just this crazy ambitious project we have. And as you said, broadband for everyone once and for all, or however you titled it. This is, previous generations, they figured out how to get water or electricity to everybody in America. This is our generation's big push, right? This is our generation's big infrastructure project. This is our chance to connect everybody in the country with what they need to thrive in the modern economy, which is a high-speed internet connection that they can afford. And I really do think that when we all look back 10 or 20 years from now, if we do this right, we will look back on this as the moment that we finally really rose to the challenge, closed the digital divide, connected everybody. And we need to do that. We're going to need everybody to be part. It's going to take years. We need everybody to be part of it. And that's the singular opportunity in front of us. So we've got a lot on our plate, Bruce, but thank you for talking about it. And it's great to have the conversation and be able to reach out to folks, and we're looking for that help.
Secretary Davidson, an awesomely inspiring finish. In fact, nothing to say, but thank you for making the time, and thanks for your service. And let's hit it together in the fall.
All righty.
Thanks
Thanks, everyone.